I met Daniel Chun on the first day of junior year at Lincoln High in San Jose, California. He sat next to me in AP Computer Science, cracking jokes about our teachers' outdated coding examples, and by lunch, we were inseparable. We weren't just friends, we were brothers. Hello guys, welcome to my channel where interesting stories of revenge are told. My best friend stole my $300,000 startup idea in high school, framed me as a drug dealer, and sent me to prison for 10 years. He never imagined I'd return as the federal auditor who destroyed his billion-dollar IPO. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Daniel and I spent every weekend in his garage sketching business plans on whiteboards, dreaming about Silicon Valley success stories. He had the charisma, the connections through his tech executive parents. I had the ideas, the technical skills, the vision that kept us up until 3 in the morning. "We're going to change the world, man," Daniel would say, his eyes bright with ambition. "You and me, partners for life." I believed him. God, I believed every word. By senior year, I had developed something special. A software platform that could revolutionize how small businesses managed inventory and sales through AI-driven predictions. It wasn't just another app. It was elegant, efficient, and years ahead of its time. Daniel saw the potential immediately. "This is it," he said, grabbing my shoulders. "This is our ticket, but we need capital, real money." I spent 6 months pitching to every investor I could find. My parents mortgaged their house. My uncle in Sacramento sold his car. Friends of the family pooled resources. By graduation, I had raised $300,000. $300,000 that I handed to Daniel with a handshake and a smile. "You're better with the business side," I told him. "I trust you completely." He looked me straight in the eye. Brothers don't let each other down. That summer, we registered the company. Daniel insisted on handling the paperwork, the legal stuff, the boring details. I focused on perfecting the code, making our dream bulletproof. I should have read those documents more carefully. I should have questioned why my name appeared as a consultant instead of co-founder. But I trusted him. That was my first mistake. The betrayal didn't come with a warning. It came with handcuffs. I was working late in our tiny office space when the DEA agents burst through the door. They threw me against the wall, shouting about drug trafficking, money laundering, felony charges that made no sense. "There's been a mistake," I kept saying. "I'm a software developer. I don't know what you're talking about." They found everything in my apartment. Cocaine, methamphetamine, ledgers with my handwriting detailing transactions I'd never made, bank transfers to Colombian accounts I'd never opened. It was perfect. Too perfect. During interrogation, they showed me evidence that would make any jury convict me. Text messages from my phone arranging drug deals, emails discussing shipments, financial records showing I'd been running a distribution network for 18 months. "We've been watching you," the lead agent said. "Your partner Daniel Chun came forward, gave us everything. He's cooperating fully." My blood ran cold. "Daniel? What did he tell you?" "That you used the startup as a front. That he only discovered the truth recently and wanted to do the right thing. He's willing to testify against you." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The brother I trusted had orchestrated my destruction with surgical precision. My public defender was overworked and underpaid. The evidence against me was overwhelming. Daniel took the stand in a crisp suit, tears in his eyes, explaining how I'd manipulated him, used his family connections, betrayed his trust. He was convincing, Academy Award convincing. When the judge sentenced me to 10 years in federal prison, I searched the courtroom for Daniel's face. I needed to see something, anything that would explain why. He wouldn't look at me. That hurt more than the prison doors slamming shut behind me. The first night in my cell, I finally understood the scope of his plan. He'd stolen my idea, rebranded the company entirely under his name, and used my investor money as a seed capital. The drug charges weren't just to remove me. They were to ensure I'd be so discredited that even if I survived prison, no one would ever believe my version of events. Daniel Chun wasn't just a thief. He was a monster wearing my best friend's face. I lay on that thin mattress, staring at concrete ceiling, and made myself a promise. If I survived this, if I ever walked free again, I wouldn't destroy him with anger or violence. I'd destroy him with precision. I'd take everything he stole from me and burn his entire world to the ground. But I'd do it legally, perfectly, so completely that he'd never recover. The first step was surviving. The second step was becoming someone Daniel Chan would never recognize. Someone patient enough to wait 10 years for the perfect revenge. The education of silence. Prison didn't break me. It educated me. Lompoc Federal Correctional Institution became my university, and survival became my curriculum. The first week, I kept my head down, spoke to no one, and observed everything. I learned quickly that anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. Other inmates counted days on their cell walls. I counted opportunities. The prison library became my sanctuary. While most guys fought over television time or yard privileges, I devoured every book on corporate law, securities regulation, and federal compliance I could find. The law librarian, a former accountant serving time for embezzlement, noticed my hunger. "You're different," he said one afternoon, sliding a thick textbook across the table. "Most guys in here want to forget the world outside. You're trying to understand it." "I'm trying to beat it," I replied. He smiled. "Then you'll need this. Securities and Exchange Commission regulations. Dry as hell, but if you're patient enough, it's pure power." I spent 3 years working through that material. Every clause, every subsection, every loophole and requirement. While Daniel was out building his tech empire on my stolen foundation, I was learning exactly how that empire could be dismantled. At night, lying in my bunk, I replayed every conversation Daniel and I ever had, every business discussion, every technical detail I'd shared. I mentally reconstructed my original code, my patents, my documentation. Everything he'd stolen was cataloged in my memory. I made friends carefully. Marcus, a former Wall Street analyst doing time for insider trading, taught me how to read financial statements like poetry. He showed me how companies hide problems in footnotes, how executives manipulate earnings reports, how IPOs can be engineered to look golden while hiding rot underneath. "The game isn't about being honest," Marcus explained during our morning walks. "It's about being technically legal while morally bankrupt. Guys like your friend? They always leave breadcrumbs." I absorbed everything like a sponge. Business strategy, accounting principles, federal audit procedures, the intricate dance between corporate ambition and regulatory oversight. My cellmate, Raymond, was serving 15 years for tax fraud. He taught me patience. "Revenge is a dish best served cold," he'd say in his gravelly voice. But most people don't have the stomach to let it freeze properly. They rush. They make mistakes. The real art is waiting until your enemy feels completely safe. "How long did you wait?" I asked. 7 years. And when I moved, it was perfect. They never saw it coming." He paused. "Of course, I also got caught, so maybe take my advice with some salt." We both laughed. Even in prison, you find moments of dark humor. I earned my GED, then started correspondence courses in business administration and finance. The prison education coordinator thought I was rehabilitating myself, preparing for honest work after release. She had no idea I was forging weapons. Year 4, I began tracking Daniel's company through old business magazines in a library. Tech Vision Solutions, my stolen idea, rebranded with venture capital funding and glowing press coverage. Daniel's face smiled from Forbes, Fortune, and TechCrunch. 30 under 30 entrepreneur. Silicon Valley's next visionary. The future of AI-driven business solutions. Every article was a knife in my chest. Every accolade was built on my work, my code, my vision. But I didn't let rage consume me. Instead, I studied his interviews, analyzed his business strategy, identified his partnerships and investors. I was mapping his kingdom, so I'd know exactly where to strike. Year 6 brought a breakthrough. A new inmate, Thomas, had been a patent attorney before his conviction. He reviewed my case during recreation time, reading through the limited legal documents I'd managed to keep. "This is insane," he muttered. "Your original patent applications, your documentation. If you still have proof of concept from before the company registration, you might have a case." "Might isn't good enough," I said. "I need certainty." "Then you need to become an expert, not just in your technology, but in intellectual property law, corporate formation, everything. You need to know more than any lawyer he could hire." So I did. I spent the next 2 years becoming fluent in patent law, trademark disputes, and corporate malfeasance. I learned how the SEC investigates companies preparing for IPOs. I understood the audit process, the due diligence requirements, the federal oversight that could make or break a public offering. Every night, I visualized my return, not as a vengeful ex-convict, but as something far more dangerous, a man with legitimate authority and intimate knowledge of Daniel's vulnerabilities. The other inmates thought I was crazy, spending every free moment studying regulations and corporate structures. They called me the professor, with a mix of respect and pity. But Marcus understood. "You're not planning revenge," he said during our last conversation before his release. "You're planning annihilation. There's a difference. Revenge is emotional. Annihilation is mathematical. You're calculating every variable, every angle. That's beautiful, man. Terrifying, but beautiful." Year 9, I learned that Tech Vision Solutions was preparing for an IPO, a billion-dollar valuation. Daniel Chun was about to become one of Silicon Valley's youngest billionaires. The timing was perfect. I would be released in 18 months. Just enough time to position myself, rebuild my credentials, and become someone the federal government would trust. Just enough time to become invisible. My parole officer would later describe me as a model prisoner, rehabilitated, educated, ready to contribute positively to society. If only she knew that every book I'd read, every skill I'd acquired, every connection I'd made was a tool forged for a single purpose. Daniel Chun had stolen 10 years of my life. I was going to take his entire future, and he would never see me coming. Invisible vengeance begins. When I finally stepped out of Lompoc on a cold February morning, the world had moved on. But I hadn't forgotten a single detail. My mother picked me up in her old Honda. She looked smaller than I remembered, worn down by a decade of shame and whispered judgments from neighbors who believed I was a drug dealer. My father had passed away 3 years into my sentence. Heart attack. I like to think it was natural causes, but part of me knew the stress of having a convicted son had killed him. "Welcome home, baby," my mother said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like lavender and forgiveness. I held her tight. "I'm going to make this right, Mom. I promise." She pulled back, searching my eyes. "Just promise me you'll stay out of trouble. Build a quiet life. That's all I want." I smiled and lied. "Of course." The first 3 months, I lived in my mother's guest room in Fremont, working at a Best Buy fixing computers. The manager, Jerry, believed in second chances. He didn't care about my record as long as I showed up on time and did good work. "You're overqualified for this," he said, watching me diagnose a network issue in under 2 minutes. "You could be running your own IT consulting firm." "Maybe someday," I replied. "Right now, I just need stability." But at night, I was building something else entirely. I'd registered a small consulting company, Apex Compliance Solutions, offering bookkeeping and regulatory advice to startups. Nothing flashy, no website, just word-of-mouth referrals and impeccable work. I started small, helping friends of friends navigate tax requirements and corporate filings. Every client paid in full and received more value than they expected. My reputation grew quietly, carefully, in the exact circles I needed. By month 6, I had enough credibility to apply for certified public accountant examination eligibility. My prison education, combined with correspondence courses, qualified me. I studied 16 hours a day, passed all 4 sections on the first try, and became a licensed CPA. From convicted felon to certified professional in 18 months. The transformation had to be legitimate, documented, beyond reproach, because what I was planning required absolute credibility. While I built my quiet empire, I tracked Daniel obsessively. Tech Vision Solutions was thriving. Series C funding, partnerships with Fortune 500 companies, and the crown jewel, IPO preparations with Goldman Sachs underwriting. Daniel had gotten married 2 years earlier. Catherine Morrison, a stunning marketing executive from a wealthy San Francisco family. Their wedding photos looked like a fairy tale. Her smile was radiant. His was triumphant. I studied her social media carefully. Instagram posts revealed a woman who loved art galleries, morning yoga, and meaningful conversations. Her captions suggested loneliness masked by luxury. Comments hinted at a husband too busy building empires to notice her. She was vulnerable, and vulnerability could be useful. Year 2 of freedom. I engineered our first meeting at a charity gala in Palo Alto. Apex Compliance Solutions had grown enough that I could afford the $1,000 ticket. I wore a tailored suit, styled my hair, and became someone completely different from the kid Daniel had destroyed. Catherine stood alone near the silent auction, studying a painting. I approached casually. "Rothko reproduction," I said. "The originals at the SFMOMA." She turned, surprised. "You know art. I know loneliness disguised as abstract expressionism." I smiled. "I'm Michael Reed. Catherine Chun." She shook my hand, her grip gentle. "That's a rather dark interpretation." Rotko Comité de Suicide. His work was about expressing human tragedy through color. Seems honest to acknowledge that. She studied me with intelligent eyes. Most people at these things just pretend to understand art while networking. I'm not most people. We talked for 30 minutes. She was brilliant, funny, and desperately starved for genuine conversation. I listened more than I spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and made her laugh twice. When her phone buzzed, she sighed. "My husband. He's stuck in a board meeting, can't make it tonight. His loss," I said simply. She blushed. "It was lovely meeting you, Michael. The pleasure was entirely mine." I didn't push, didn't ask for her number, just let the moment breathe and walked away. 3 weeks later, we ran into each other at a bookstore in San Francisco. Pure coincidence, though I'd studied her Instagram enough to know her favorite spots. "Michael," her face lit up. "The art critic. Catherine, the woman married to board meetings." She laughed, holding up a novel. Trying to remember what I loved before my life became charity galas and corporate dinners. We got coffee. Then coffee became lunch the next week. Lunch became museum visits. Museum visits became long walks through Golden Gate Park, where she talked about her marriage. "Daniel's building something amazing," she said one afternoon. But somewhere along the way, he forgot we were supposed to build a life together. I listened, offered understanding, never badmouthed her husband. "You're easy to talk to," she said. "Most people just want something from me. You just listen. Maybe I understand what it's like to be invisible," I replied. Over 6 months, our friendship deepened. I never made inappropriate advances, never suggested anything improper. I was simply present in ways her husband wasn't. She fell in love with someone who saw her, who valued her thoughts, who made time. She fell in love with the truth, never knowing who I really was. And that was the most painful part of my revenge, because Catherine was genuinely kind, genuinely lonely, genuinely deserving of better than Daniel Chun. But she was also collateral damage in a war she didn't know was being fought. Meanwhile, Apex Compliance Solutions caught the attention of a former SEC regulator I'd strategically networked with. Margaret Torres needed consultants for a new federal oversight initiative targeting tech IPOs. "Your work is exceptional," she said during our meeting. "Clean, thorough, and you understand both the technical and regulatory sides. We need people like you." 3 months later, I was appointed as a federal compliance consultant specializing in technology sector audits. The position came with security clearance, federal authority, and access to confidential corporate filings. It came with the power to audit companies preparing for public offerings. Companies like Tech Vision Solutions. When I saw Daniel's company on my assignment list, I didn't celebrate. I simply smiled and began the most thorough audit of my career. Everything was falling into place. Daniel Chun was about to discover that the friend he'd buried was now the authority who could destroy him. And I was completely, perfectly invisible. The perfect execution. The assignment letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Tech Vision Solutions, scheduled IPO in 90 days, requiring comprehensive federal compliance audit per SEC regulations. I sat in my modest office, holding that document, and felt a decade of patience crystallize into perfect clarity. This was it. I assembled my team carefully. 3 junior auditors, all brilliant, all hungry to prove themselves on a high-profile case. None of them knew my history. To them, I was simply Michael Reed, the meticulous consultant who'd built a reputation for finding problems everyone else missed. This is a big one, I told him during our first meeting. $1 billion valuation. Silicon Valley darling. We need to be thorough, professional, and absolutely by the book. No shortcuts. They nodded eagerly, unaware they were becoming instruments of surgical revenge. Our first day at TechVision's headquarters in Palo Alto, I walked through those glass doors with my team, wearing a visitor badge and carrying an iPad loaded with audit protocols. Daniel was in New York meeting with bankers. Perfect. I needed time to work undisturbed. His CFO, Richard Park, greeted us nervously. We've prepared all documentation you requested. Conference room 3 is yours for the duration. Appreciated, I said smoothly. We'll try to minimize disruption. The first week, I reviewed standard materials. Financial statements, corporate governance documents, shareholder agreements. Everything looked pristine on the surface. Daniel had hired excellent lawyers and accountants. But I wasn't looking at the surface. I was looking for the foundation, my stolen intellectual property buried underneath a decade of corporate restructuring. Week 2, I found a first thread. An early patent application from 8 years ago filed under TechVision's name, describing AI-driven inventory prediction algorithms. My original work from high school. The patent listed Daniel Chun as the sole inventor. But the filing date was suspicious, only 3 months after my conviction. And the technical documentation used phrasing I recognized, sentences I'd written in our garage, terminology I'd invented. I pulled one of my junior auditors aside. Sarah, I need you to request all original patent documentation, including preliminary notes, development logs, and source code repositories from 2015 to 2017. That's pretty far back, she said. Is there a specific compliance concern? Just being thorough. IPOs require verification of intellectual property ownership. Let's make sure everything's clean. She nodded and filed the request. Richard Park's assistant looked concerned when delivering the boxes of materials. Some of these files are archived. It took us a while to locate everything. No problem, I replied. Take your time. We're patient. Night 3 of that week, alone in the conference room at 11 p.m., I found it. A development log from June 2015, 2 months before my arrest, with commit messages in my coding style, solving problems using approaches I'd pioneered. But the username on the commits was Daniel Chun. He'd taken my code repository and systematically replaced my name with his across thousands of files. Almost perfect, except he'd missed metadata timestamps that showed files created before his claimed development timeline. He'd been sloppy, arrogant, confident that a convicted drug dealer would never be in a position to expose him. I photographed everything with my phone, building a parallel evidence file the SEC would need. Week 3, Daniel finally returned and requested a meeting. I walked into his corner office with its panoramic views of the bay, carrying my leather portfolio, my expression professionally neutral. He looked older, successful. His suit probably cost more than my mother's monthly rent, but his eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, always measuring angles. Mr. Reed, he said, extending his hand. Richard tells me your audit is very comprehensive. I shook his hand, maintaining eye contact. We take our responsibilities seriously, Mr. Chun. The SEC expects nothing less for companies of your caliber. Something flickered across his face. A moment of confusion, like he was trying to place me. Have we met before? He asked. I don't believe so, though I've followed TechVision's success with interest. Impressive what you've built. He relaxed, ego satisfied. Thank you. We've worked very hard, though I'm sure you know that tech innovation requires, let's say, sacrifices and difficult decisions. I'm sure it does, I replied evenly. We discussed audit timelines, documentation needs, standard questions. He was smooth, confident, completely unaware that the man sitting across from him had spent 10 years planning this exact moment. As I stood to leave, he asked, "Where did you say you went to school?" "Stanford," I lied smoothly. "You?" "Berkeley." "Go Bears." He laughed, though I started my real education in a garage in San Jose back in high school. Built my first company concept with a friend before I really knew what I was doing. My smile didn't waver. Those early partnerships can be formative. Absolutely. though sometimes you outgrow people. Evolution of business, you know. I understand completely, Mr. Chun. Sometimes people get exactly what they deserve. He nodded, missing the weight behind my words entirely. That evening, I met Catherine for dinner at our usual spot in North Beach. She looked beautiful, but exhausted. "Daniel's barely been home," she said, picking at her pasta. "The IPO is consuming everything. Sometimes I wonder if he'd notice if I disappeared." I reached across the table, touching her hand gently. "You deserve better than invisible, Catherine." She looked at me with those honest eyes. "Michael, I need to tell you something. I think I'm falling." "Don't," I interrupted softly. "Not yet. There are things happening that you don't understand. Just trust me for a few more weeks." "Can you do that?" Confusion crossed her face, but she nodded. "Okay." I hated myself for using her, but I'd come too far to stop now. Week 4, I compile my final audit report. Pages of technical violations, intellectual property concerns, and financial irregularities. Nothing illegal enough to tank the company immediately, but serious enough to trigger a deeper SEC investigation. And buried in Appendix 7, cross-referenced with federal databases, was the evidence that would destroy Daniel completely. Patent fraud, stolen intellectual property, and connections to a 2015 drug trafficking case that had convenient timing with corporate formation. I submitted the report through official channels, then made one additional call. FBI Corporate Crimes Division, Agent Morrison speaking. "Agent Morrison, my name is Michael Reed. I'm a federal compliance consultant, and I've uncovered evidence of intellectual property theft and potential criminal conspiracy related to TechVision Solutions' upcoming IPO." "Go on." "I believe the company's founder framed someone for drug trafficking 10 years ago to steal their technology and eliminate competition. I have documentation, code repositories, and evidence that could warrant a criminal investigation." There was a pause. "That's a serious allegation. Can you come in tomorrow?" "Absolutely." "And Agent Morrison? You should also know that I'm the person who was framed. I served 10 years for crimes I didn't commit. Everything I'm providing is documented, verified, and legally obtained through my current federal audit authority." Another longer pause. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., bring everything." The next 72 hours moved like a carefully choreographed dance. Federal agents interviewed me for 6 hours, reviewed my evidence, cross-referenced with their own databases. They found more than even I had uncovered. Daniel had paid off a corrupt DEA agent who'd since been arrested for unrelated charges. Bank transfers that looked suspicious under new scrutiny. A pattern of corporate theft hidden behind legitimate business growth. On day 87 of TechVision's IPO countdown, federal agents walked into Daniel's office with a warrant. I was in the building, conducting a routine follow-up audit meeting, when the commotion started. Daniel was led out in handcuffs, his face pale, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume. Our eyes met in the hallway, and in that moment, recognition finally hit him like lightning. His mouth opened slightly. "You're... Hello, Daniel," I said quietly. "Remember me?" The color drained from his face entirely. "This is impossible. You're a federal auditor, a licensed CPA, a man who spent 10 years learning exactly how to dismantle everything you built on stolen ground." Agents guided him past me toward the elevators. "You can't do this," he shouted. "I'll fight this. I have lawyers." "So did I replied. "But I had something better. The truth, and a decade of patience." The stock price collapsed within hours. Investors pulled out. The IPO was canceled indefinitely. By the end of the week, TechVision Solutions was being liquidated to pay legal fees and victim restitution. Catherine filed for divorce 3 days later. She called me, crying. "Did you know?" she asked. "About Daniel?" "About everything." I took a breath. I knew who he really was. "Who are you, Michael?" "Really? Someone who lost everything to the man you married. Someone who spent 10 years becoming the person who could bring him to justice." Silence stretched between us. Then, softly, "Did you ever care about me? Or was I just part of your plan?" That question hurt more than anything Daniel had done. "I never planned on you," I said honestly. "You were supposed to be collateral, But Catherine, you deserved honesty I couldn't give. I am sorry. She hung up. I never spoke to her again. She deserved a fresh start, away from both of us. Daniel's trial lasted 4 months. He was convicted on 14 counts, including intellectual property theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice. The drug trafficking frame-up earned him an additional 20 years. When they sentenced him to 35 years in federal prison, I was in the courtroom. He looked at me one final time, broken and defeated. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just met his eyes with calm certainty. As I walked out of that courthouse into California sunshine, I realized something profound. Revenge doesn't need violence or anger. It needs patience, intelligence, and perfect timing. Daniel stole 10 years of my life, $300,000, and my best friend. I took his freedom, his fortune, his future, and his legacy. I never laid a hand on him, and that made the victory absolute. A lesson in justice. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply becoming everything those who hurt you never imagined you could be. Prison doesn't have to break you. It can educate you. Betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. It can refine you. And justice, when served with patience and precision, is sweeter than any act of immediate anger. The universe rewards those who transform pain into purpose and who understand that true power comes not from striking fast, but from striking perfectly. Your comeback doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be complete. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and tell us what you learned in the comments below.